You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday night therapy session here on the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills Guys. You can find us on Twitter at the Bills Guys. Bills haven't given us the old C&D for a Twitter handle yet. I'm sure it's coming. We're presented by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. I want to thank Carolina Frank getting things started off in the comment section. And obviously, as always, feel welcome to vent this evening as we go through this therapeutic session here on the Air Raid Hour. So let's jump right into it. Bills fall to the Vikings 33-30 in overtime. This is twice in 2 years now that the Buffalo Bills have played in the finger quotes game of the year. And it's twice in 2 years they've ended up on the losing end of that game of the year. To me, I don't know. That speaks volumes. I said yesterday, like, whatever the it factor is, I can't put my finger on it. This team seems to be missing it. I know Hansel sort of rebuked me and he says, well, explain the Ravens game, explain the Chiefs game. And he's right. Maybe I was just in my feelings last night, but to me, losing the game of the year back to back speaks volumes. What are your thoughts on this difficult loss here?
The Bills have found themselves in some of these epic games in the last couple of years. If you go back even to 2020, you think about the Rams game in the regular season, got the big lead. Rams came back. The Bills end up coming back and winning at the end. Obviously, that was a little bit earlier in the season, so doesn't get talked about a ton. But the Bills have been in a lot of these kind of wild games in the Josh Allen era, and notably in the last couple years. And I think, we talk about this being the game of the year so far in the NFL, and that may be the case. But ultimately, when you look at it, it comes down to, a game of the year for who? Not us. Agree.
The NFL.
For the NFL. And they dub these things.
Everyone today at work, the water cooler, everyone was talking about this game. This was what people were talking about.
Yep. And the fact of the matter is, this game ends up being hopefully what we see is just an out-of-conference tough loss, terrible loss that we'll look back on and just say that, like, if we're going to go through it tonight, all that these things, hopefully in the big picture becomes something that's inconsequential by the end of the season. And the Arizona game from 2 years ago. Yep.
I want your thoughts on this a little bit, because to me, the Arizona game was a snooze fest up until like the last minute and a half.
Yeah,
where
that's fair.
Allen drove the ball. I don't really think of that. I think of that as like the play of the year.
Yeah, not a game of the year.
Game of the year. I mean, also, I don't really remember much from 2 years ago, so it could have been.
But it is
not been any games that year.
Out of all of these games, right? Like the Hail Murray is probably the play that is remembered the most, right? And so that's why it sticks out.
You get one in SB or something,
just an individual play standpoint. Yeah, so I mean, like the game itself, it's a game to write home about, but the moment made it like bigger than, like, the moment itself became bigger than the actual game, right? And that's why. So the Bills have found themselves on the wrong end of these more times than not the last couple of years, and it is interesting to talk about, like, and we hear the coach speak, but hey, come, like, we'll learn from it. We got to be better. We got to be better. But like, you got to finish some of these games every once in a while. Ultimately, this game, like I said, out of conference, middle of the season, hopefully we look back and say it's inconsequential and didn't derail the Bills. We know that in past situations like this, sometimes these types of things can fuel the Bills to go on a run. We've seen this happen in the past as well, but ultimately it's not going to matter at the end of the day, because what at the end of the day matters is what this team ends up doing in the postseason, even when they get there. Bills Mafia 5-6 says, hey, Chiefs looked a hell of a lot worse after 9 games last year. Got the the Chiefs. People were writing the Chiefs off somewhat, not all the way last year. Similar type of thing. I believe the Raiders beat them last year, or someone beat them, and there was talks of like, oh well, maybe the Chiefs aren't quite as good, and it just all comes back to the playoffs, right? So that's in my mind right now of like trying to keep me going.
Yeah, Bills Mafia 056, I think, with some good perspective. I mean, where the Bills stand right now, 6-3, third place in the AFC East, 6th seed in the playoffs, still twice as many wins as we have losses. The next 5 on the docket versus Cleveland, at Detroit on a short week, at the Patriots on Thursday night, versus the Jets, versus the Dolphins. So the Bills still very much control their own destiny, and they got 5 critical games coming up where they can really set the tone. I think this is a really similar to last year when the team was 7-6, reeling from, losses to Jacksonville and Indy and New England and Tampa Bay. They went on to have really 2 spectacular playoff performances and were 13 seconds away from the AFC Championship game, and probably, in my opinion, would have been the Super Bowl champions last year had they defeated Kansas City. But that's the argument people are going to make. The Bills blow games like this, they have to play in Arrowhead. So the Bills have 5 critical games coming up. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but if you can beat Cleveland shorthanded, because who knows who's going to get healthy. You have the short week coming up after that. Maybe you rest some guys. You can get past Cleveland. You can get past Detroit. You can stay healthy. Maybe you can get back in a rhythm. You don't fall into a trap with these 2 teams. You're healthy. You're starting to get more comfortable again, and you head into that critical 3-game stretch, 3 straight AFC East opponents. The Bills still very much control their own destiny. So we have that to lean on. Like, the Bills still do control their own destiny.
They do. And like you said, like, they had a stretch last year where it was like Jekyll and Hyde, where they lost to the Jags. They come out, they destroy the Jets. Then they lose to the Colts in embarrassing fashion. And then they come out and destroy the Saints on Thanksgiving. So it's like, it is weird. And yeah, we'll talk about Trey a little bit tonight. Something feels off now, says Bills Mafia 056, and we will definitely get to that. But look, two convincing wins, or even a convincing win against Cleveland coming up here, I think will calm the nerves a little bit from Bills Mafia. I think part of probably a little bit of the uneasiness comes from the fact that even during those stretches last year where the Bills were going a little Jekyll and Hyde, the AFC East was really never out of their control at any point. They never fell out of the division lead, right, during that stretch. And so this time is a little different because now they find themselves in 3rd place. But as you said, they have sort of that that card in the holster, so to speak, with those 3 division games in a row after this stretch against Cleveland and Detroit. So a lot of football still to be played, a lot still in the Bills' control. And ultimately, if the Bills, do what we expect them to do, the cream rises up, they will hopefully take care of business here in the next several weeks. So think about that now, obviously, but that's kind of the perspective I'm trying to have here.
Before we get to the game too much, just a quick update on the injuries and where a lot of guys stand. I know Bills Mafia 056 mentioned Trey White. Sean McDermott's comments today, Jordan Poyer, Gregory Rousseau, Kyer Elam are all finger quotes improving. We'll see just how much they are improving when we get the first injury designations this week, whether they were, DNP, limited, or full. Kumaro week to week with another ankle injury. I wouldn't be surprised if they long-term IR him this time. And then now we're talking about guys like Isaiah Coulter and Tanner Gentry possibly getting a call up to the Bills roster, because remember, no more Isaiah Hodgins. That was a tough loss. Edmunds tweaked his groin, says McDermott. McDermott says they'll see where he's at as the week goes on. I wouldn't be surprised if Edmunds sat out Cleveland in order to be ready for Detroit on the short week. And then as per Trey White, I'm not going to get into physical versus mental. He said he's just not in a position where he's ready. That was Sean McDermott's quote on Tre'Davious White today. So that sounds a little ominous as well in terms of Trey White. A lot of people were questioning, well, We lost Isaiah Hodgins. We lost Brandon Bryant. We lost some of these guys to other teams. Why did we rush Trey White? We didn't have to activate him. Well, he has been practicing against starters and backups as opposed to with the scout team, which is something he couldn't do when he was on the PUP designated list. So the Bills are sacrificing that roster spot to get him out there against, some of these other guys in practice. I would guess sometime within the next month, we're going to see Tre'Davious White, but I would love to see him get out there and get some run against Cleveland or Detroit before we have those 3 games in the division.
I would like that too. Some interesting information though coming out from Calais Campbell, a player in the NFL today, talking about the turf, about 7 or 8 of the different fields in the NFL having statistical evidence that shows worse for non-contact injuries, Detroit being one of those fields. And we know the Bills play in Detroit on Thanksgiving. And we know, as we just said, there's that really important 3-game stretch coming up after that Detroit game. If I was a betting man right now, I would bet that we see Tre'Davious White come back the game after the Thanksgiving game. That would be my betting sort of feel and gut feel right now based on some of the phrasing that Sean McDermott used. It didn't sound like there was like a very confident feeling that he was going to be back sooner rather than later. And I'm not saying like extended amount of time still, but knowing that turf in Detroit is a potential issue, and knowing the Saints, by the way, the Superdome was mentioned on that list by Calais Campbell, that same turf, that silt turf, which is where he got injured. So I would think game after Detroit would be where I would put my money if I was going to expect him back.
Yeah, that Calais Campbell tweet is actually a copy and paste. A lot of players, I think about 20 or so, a dozen or so players have been copying and pasting that onto their feed to just bring awareness to it. They talk about how those fields can be taken away and grass can be put down for soccer matches within days. Why don't they have the same respect for NFL players and things? So the players are starting to vocalize their dissatisfaction with specifically that turf and just turf in general. And I think that's why Sean McDermott, being the players coach that he is, really advocated for grass turf on this new field the Buffalo Bills are going to be constructing here in the next decade or so. Really good point from Mattis Center here. He says, we have coaching issues. Can't play with a target on our back. Play calling is a problem, as is predictability. Florio on NBC had a great segment on how Peterson watched film and knew Josh's tendencies. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to Josh Allen specifically. Patrick Peterson made those comments in the postgame. He said, hey, I knew he was going to be aggressive. I knew his tendencies. Talked about watching the film as Florio echoed there. And he knew to have his head in the swivel and be waiting for shots like that to the end zone that ended up costing the Buffalo Bills the game there at the end. So we're going to get into that momentarily. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. Man, I wish I had some Picassos to eat my feelings last night. Unfortunately, I did not. So all I had to lean on was my wife's the Christmas crack that they make with the chip, or the what is it? The saltine cracker with the chocolate on it. So good. It's baking season in the Mathis household. So I had that to lean on last night as I was eating my feelings post game. But I want to pivot next to the 4 things that I think ultimately cost the Buffalo Bills the football game. And as I go through these 4 things, Dave, I want you to sort of talk about, your feelings on what I mentioned. And if you have something that I don't mention, I want you to add it as well. And people in the comment section, feel free to add what you think the reason why the Buffalo Bills lost the game. And I tried to whittle it down to 4 things, and these are the 4 things I came up with. Number 1 was the quarterback, Josh Allen, and specifically the turnovers. You can't excuse him, and you can't excuse it just because you like him. You got to be critical of the starting quarterback, especially in those situations. I think maybe some people on social media might be going a little overboard, but at the same time, you can't really defend what Josh Allen did yesterday, specifically what went on in that fourth quarter. The fumble in the red zone, inexcusable. The interception in the end zone to end the game when he had a dump off to Devin Singletary that could have picked him up 3 or 4 yards on second down to set up a 3rd and short. Not risking the football, not risking the turnover when you could have at least played for the tie. All of those different things. You love him when he can squeeze it in there. You want to rip your hair out when he can't, and he didn't there, especially dealing with the elbow issues he was dealing with. I think a lot of people wish he wouldn't have tried to fit it into that window. Maybe if he would have thrown it over the top to Gabriel Davis, he could have completed that pass, but he didn't. So to me, number one, Josh Allen's turnovers. A lot of the times when your team is so Josh Allen centric, as Josh Allen goes, you go.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, and there's, I kind of agree with some of the comments there around the arm arrogance and some of that. And Roy says we had 4 turnovers. Allen only covered 3. He had been so good prior to that second half of that Green Bay game of not turning the ball over this year. And really last year, if you think about it, yes, he did have the 15 interceptions last year, but that was over the course of the entire season. For a guy that throws as much as he did, over 600 pass attempts, a team that throws as much as they do for the Bills, it's going to happen. Less than 1 a game. I can kind of live with that. Right now he's got 10. So he's obviously on pace for a little more than that 15 than he had last year, and he leads the league in interceptions, and he's turned the ball over multiple times in the last 10 quarters. And it's not even just about the turnovers in a vacuum. It's when the turnovers have happened. Not all of them have been like brutal game-killing type turnovers. Obviously, in the Green Bay game, it didn't cost the team the win or anything, but the turnover, like the pick against the Jets in the red zone, the pick here in the red zone, and obviously the last play at the end of the game, like the fumble, the snap exchange, that's somewhat on him. Like, I don't know who's fully to blame. It's on both guys probably, but at the end of the day, the quarterback is the one who's going to have to take the blame, right or wrong, in some of these. And in a lot of these, he's directly responsible, right? And so when you're getting paid $250 million and we love Josh Allen, this is not anything to say that we don't love him and wish we had, we want Josh Allen on this team, and he is the guy that can lead us to the promised land. You can be objectively critical to say that he's had some really bad turnovers, right? And it's just a fact. And I will say there is there is a fact here about the volume passing is just going to lend itself to having more turnovers. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are 2 of the league leaders in interceptions this year. Both Kansas City and Buffalo are bottom half of the league in turnover differential.
There was a great stat today from Mark Counterman on Twitter. He says, if you're on team punts are a turnover too, then the Bills' turnover problem starts to look less bad. So if you add teams turnovers and you add teams punts, the Bills have 18 giveaways, which is outrageous. But they only have 18 punts. That's 36 total finger quotes turnovers. The only team with less turnovers, if you count punts as turnovers, is the Philadelphia Eagles, who have turned the ball over 3 times and punted 31 times. I mean, you look at other halves of the league, Denver's only turned the ball over 10 times this year, but they punted 54. That's 64 times they've given the ball away, as opposed to the 36 times the Buffalo Bills have given the ball to their team.
Devil's advocate, though.
The spot of the field where you turn the ball over also.
Spot of the field. The red zone turnovers where the Bills had been have really struggled this year, honestly, in the red zone, the lack of creativity, whatever it may be. So I would not equate all punts to being turnovers. So maybe if it's maybe I would equate punting on the opponent's side of the field.
Yeah,
I don't know, something where you're over midfield and then you have to punt. But when you're on the opponent inside the opponent's 20 and you maybe that should count as 2 in that equation. I don't know. It's pretty bad.
The second thing I had on my list here was the second half offense couldn't put the game away. 24 points in the first half, 6 points in the second half plus overtime. I'm not saying the Buffalo Bills had to come out and drop 48 on the Minnesota Vikings, but they had multiple opportunities in the second half to put the game away. My next two dings on this team, reasons we lost the game, are defensive, but all of those problems probably go away if the Bills just have a pulse on offense in the second half. They got to midfield on one drive, and it was 2nd and 1, and they had to punt because they couldn't convert on a 2nd and 1. They ran the ball, got stuffed, and then threw an incompletion and then punted. And then they were down in the red zone, and it was 2nd and 1. It wasn't even 2nd and goal. It was 2nd and 1 or 2nd and 2. Throw. And the third throw was picked off by Patrick Peterson. You got to be kidding me. So we're going to talk about the run game in a little bit and how, in fact, the Bills can pick up a freaking yard. If the run game was going, if the Ken Dorsey, we're going to talk about Ken Dorsey in a little bit. If just everyone was on the same page and this offense had a pulse in the second half and they pick up those couple of yards at midfield and keep the drive going, or they punch the ball into the end zone when they threw that pick to Patrick Peterson, the game's over. We don't have to talk about Tremaine Edmunds getting hurt. We don't talk about Cam Lewis knocking a ball down. We don't have to talk about Justin Jefferson's sick block on DeMar Hamlin and Cam Lewis taking a bad angle, which led to a Dalvin Cook touchdown. We're not talking about any of that today. We're talking about a Bills W. So for number 2, I put the Bills second half offense inability to score more than 6 points.
And you look at the trends since coming out of the bye, the Bills' second half offense in all 3 games has been abysmal. Obviously, they won the Packers game, but the second half offense in that game really wasn't too great either. And going away from the running game, which obviously was a weakness of the Packers defense, going away from that, you've been running the ball well against the Vikings in this game, and you go away from that. I don't know what the right word is to use. I don't know if it's arrogance. I don't know if it's ignorance by Ken Dorsey. I don't know if it's ineptitude. I don't know if it's just him learning, distrust, trying to learn on the fly. Like we question this, and it like brings back memories of early on in the Josh Allen era of us questioning Brian Daboll at times, and eventually kind of work through it. So in my mind, do we give him the benefit of the doubt and say like it's a learning experience, but at the same time, like these are pretty, I feel like, egregious mistakes to make situationally, and situational football would tell you when you were trying to salt a 17-point lead away, 14, 17-point lead away, that when you have 2nd and 1 and you can take another 40 seconds off the game clock there, plus get a new set of downs and have the ball deep in opponent territory. And even if you decide later on in the drive inside the 10 or inside the 5 that you do want to go for it on 4th down, you've at least taken several more minutes off the clock and done that. Money Jones here coming in with the super chat. Thank you for that. Diggs had 12 catches on 16 targets. Am I off to think that he should have gotten even more? I mean, Diggs was the only guy. I mean, Gabe Davis had a good game. I'm not going to try to take that away from him. But at the end of the day,
you have to have a diverse offense. It can't be one guy.
It can't be one guy. And in spots, Knox looked good. In spots, Davis looked good. But in reality, it was going away from the running game. And like you said, the second half offense, which really, I think, did this team in, because it wasn't like Devin Singletary or James Cook weren't finding room to run. James Cook actually looked quite good running the ball in this game when they gave him opportunities, those tosses, him getting to the edge, almost scoring on the one play. I mean, I thought that Bill's running game was working pretty well. And especially with how they were getting James Cook involved, and they kind of, the football, Lucy took the football away. Like it's football, right? I mean, she took it away, and like they took the running game away. And that's what we're going to get to, I think, a bit later when we talk about Dorsey and the learning experience from this one.
Yeah, the third thing I had on my list was the Tremaine Edmunds injury. Tremaine Edmunds was balling out in the first half. Minnesota was afraid to throw the football over the middle of the field when they did. Tremaine Edmunds was, you saw him make a lot of really good plays. We were having a conversation in the Cover One group chat. Up until this point, most of the people in the group chat were team like, if we had to choose between Jordan Poyer or Tremaine Edmunds, we're taking Jordan Poyer in terms of extension this offseason, despite the age. He was starting to win some people over, and it was starting to shift towards, in that Cover One group chat, the way of Tremaine Edmunds and extending Tremaine Edmunds as opposed to Jordan Poyer. That's the kind of game he was having. I think a lot of people think that we're like Tremaine Edmunds homers here at Cover One because we defend him a lot. But a lot of people in that group chat, I'm not going to name any names, were up until on the first half yesterday, we're really on more Jordan Poyer's side, thinking he was more important to the defense than Edmunds. But he's starting to shift some people way of thinking, just the way his length affects the middle of the football field, even if he's not putting up statistics. He was having a huge game. He left with that injury. And then you saw the huge Dalvin Cook run. You saw them start to work the middle of the football field. Minnesota's offense picked up a lot of confidence and a lot of steam when Tremaine Edmunds left the game coming out of halftime.
I mean, it's absolutely apparent and should be objectively apparent to anyone who's watched Tremaine Edmunds this year that he's had a fantastic season, right? Mm-hmm. When he's been on the field, he's been a difference maker. Almost had an interception yesterday before he went out as well. Covering the deep middle of the field and that kind of classic cover two where the middle linebacker is responsible for dropping back into that kind of middle to deep center in that zone coverage is something that he's done exceptionally well this year. Mm-hmm. He's had multiple batted passes defensed. He's had passes defensed that have resulted in interceptions. He's played the run well. He has flown sideline to sideline. And he has played with a little bit more emotion than he has in the past, which I think has helped him. He's playing faster. And Tremaine Edmunds on the field is not really a super emotional guy, as we know in his playing time. He's not like the rah-rah guy after he makes a play, but you've seen a little bit of emotion out of him this year. And I think it's because he realizes that he's now playing more instinctually. He's playing faster. And he's making a difference in these games. And it was a huge loss to see him go out. And even I think some Tremaine Edmunds haters or anti-truthers or whatever you want to call them have to be coming around now at this point to realize that importance to what he is in this defense. And given his age, given his youth, and given his importance to the defense that we've seen this year, I can understand why people are coming around to, if you have to choose one or the other, making that your choice. I can totally understand it.
The fourth thing I had on my list was the secondary. And my issue with the secondary was when the pressure didn't get home up front, our DBs did not step up. Now, the caveat to that being Trey White's not there. Micah Hyde's not there. Jordan Poyer's not there. Kyer Elam's not there. So there's a lot of caveats to this last statement. That's why it's number 4 on my list. Stephen Ruiz of the Ringer made a great comment. You know, I have my disagreements with him all the time, but he's still a smart football mind. And he said, the Bills DBs tackle better. The Bills probably win by 3 scores was a comment that he made. And then, you know, I hate to point the finger at my guy, Cam Lewis, because I think outside of 1 or 2 plays, he played relatively solid. But at the end of the day, that Dalvin Cook touchdown run that really got the Minnesota Vikings rolling, Cam Lewis took a bad angle. And then on that 4th down, when he should have knocked it down, Justin Jefferson made that amazing catch. But at the same time, never should have been a catch because Cam Lewis shouldn't have been trying to intercept that ball. Kudos to him for taking ownership of it post-game. It's a little too late. It still was one of the main factors in costing us this ball game. So the 4th thing I had on my list was the secondary when pressure didn't get home. Because when pressure got home, Christian Benford pick, Dane Jackson pick. When the front 4 did its job, the secondary was fine. But obviously, they're just not good enough right now with that lack of talent, with that loss of talent to withstand the front 4 not getting home.
They're not. And we had kind of foreshadowed this a bit even before the Jets game and talking about Trey White's potential return. Like, hey, like maybe he doesn't need to come back from the Jets game, but we really might need him in this game against the Vikings with those talented wide receivers they have between Jefferson and Thielen. And then obviously now they had TJ Hawkinson in the mix after they just traded for him. That's a really talented skill position unit. And once you throw Dalvin Cook into the mix and his ability to kind of play it from out of the backfield as well, like that Vikings offense has some really, really good talent. And Justin Jefferson sort of being the star there in that unit. You mentioned the names missing. Like that's theoretically your starting 4 defensive backfield, right? It's like Kyer Elam, who you drafted in the 1st round, didn't play. Trey White's out. Your two all-pro safeties both out. Like you're starting a second unit secondary at best against Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. And look, say what you want about Kirk Cousins. He's been very consistent throughout his career. And Brian says here, the secondary consists of 6th rounder, 7th rounder, undrafted. Not good. And I agree. And like those guys on Minnesota are very good. And Kirk Cousins, as you mentioned, when front four is not getting home, he is a very good distributor of the football and he can make throws. And he had his throws that weren't great, but that's Kirk Cousins. But he also had plenty of really good throws and let his guys make plays. And so it was tough for the secondary. You're right. One play here or there. I would just add to that. I think that, you mentioned the struggles of the secondary. I would say like what really I think hurt me the most was like in the biggest moments of the game. I feel like that's where they had the biggest letdowns. And like
Minnesota made bigger plays in this game. When it mattered, Minnesota stepped up and made the plays and the Bills didn't.
Correct. And so from Minnesota side, they look at it and say, hey, we made the plays when we had to. From the Bills side, they look at it and say they didn't make the plays when they needed to. The 4th and 18, obviously the biggest one probably of them all. And Mattis says not having Group was a problem. That obviously was a problem.
Another first round pick out.
but let's like not be. Look, the defensive line I thought had a pretty good game overall.
You
like
can't expect them to get pressure every single play, and it was the
Oliver,
plays where they didn't. That
Oliver had a good game. Phillips had a big stop, obviously on QB sneak after he went offside.
Lawson, I thought Lawson was a monster.
Lawson was a monster. Von Miller had a big the defensive line was probably the least of my concerns in this game. Honestly,
they were fine. Yeah, they were fine.
They were fine. But that's a tough spot for your secondary to be in with those guys starting. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. And that's the next thing I wanted to get into is I wanted to get into coaching because coaching was a huge topic of conversation. So I wanted to take some time and I want to break down all 3 coaches. We're going to give Smiley, the special teams coach, a pass here. We're not going to talk about special teams because they've been playing pretty well. By the way, I think I figured out why Duke Johnson was active, and it's kind of a sad reason. You notice how Minnesota was just kicking the ball off really weird all game, like squibbing it and kicking it high and all those different things. I don't know. I haven't watched any Minnesota Vikings games this year, but if that's something they do regularly, that's probably why Duke Johnson was active because they probably didn't trust Isaiah McKenzie to field any of those. So kudos to Sean Smiley because we didn't F up on special teams at all, to my knowledge. I think they had one big return, but that was about it in that game. But let's talk about coaching here, and let's start with Sean McDermott. There were 3 calls that I want to talk about specifically, and the first one was the end zone fumble. A lot of people are like, well, they should have been in shotgun. They should have done this. In my opinion, the QB sneak was the right play in that situation, utilizing Gabe Davis as a pusher like he always is, not having Reggie Gilliam in there. To me, that was the right play by the Buffalo Bills. They just didn't execute it. What do you think about Sean McDermott's decision when we were lined up in the end zone there?
I, for the life of me, cannot understand the people who said, take the safety and get no, do not take the safety. You have to free kick it and then give Vikings a chance to kick a field goal to win the game. No, you quarterback sneak. There were some stats being thrown around. Like every time the Bills have had done a quarterback sneak on like a 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2 or less, they've converted it this year. And that was the right call in that situation. Shotgun, too many things can go wrong. You could have a high snap, whatever. You could, a lot of bad things can happen on a pass play. A quarterback sneak should be and is one of the safest plays you can run in the entire landscape of offensive play calling. The execution was just off. It was a matter of execution. It was not a matter of play calling. It's obviously easy to go back in retrospect and say they should have done this, should have done that. I will firmly stand on this ground that was the right play call, and they just totally messed up the execution.
The second,
I agree.
The second play is the one that Pops Mafia referencing here. He says kick the field goal. Bills were up 10. I'm not sure how much time was left in the game. They had an opportunity to kick a field goal, a chip shot field goal to go up 13. They chose to go for it on 4th and 1 down in the red zone. That was obviously the first Patrick Peterson interception. Again, I think that was the right decision by Sean McDermott. to go for it, to go back up 3 scores, 13 points. I mean, the Minnesota's got to score two touchdowns anyway, right? 2 touchdowns and a field goal, they tie it, or they get 2 touchdowns. To me, that was the right decision. They just didn't execute on the very next play. They had 3 chances to pick up 1 yard and they didn't do it. I like the aggressiveness there. I have no issue with them, not kicking the field goal. And again, Minnesota drove down and had a chance to score 2 touchdowns again anyway. So they would have been on the goal line with a chance to score 2 touchdowns anyway, because they drove down for 2 touchdowns.
I tend to agree. Like, you're up by 10 at the time, I believe. That would have put you up by 13. 2 touchdowns and converting both extra points would have given the Vikings the lead. I know Greg Joseph missed an extra point earlier in the game, but statistically, he's probably not likely to miss 2 in the same game. And in that case, like, you're talking about a tie ball game at that point. So in my mind, I like the decision to try to take the momentum back after the Vikings obviously just got that big touchdown run and go up by 3 possessions. If you go up by 3 possessions in that scenario, the game's over. So the Bills went for the win, and I don't necessarily think it was the wrong call. You can question the play call, and you can question
and
the
that's what we're going to
decision-making.
get to next. It's going to be
that's
Ken Dorsey.
and that's different than questioning the decision to go for it. So I think we need to separate those 2 things, because they're different. I like the call to go up by 3 possessions if that was the call, and like I would probably.
Those were the 2 big ones, and that's where I'm like, people are like, Sean McDermott, like, oh, he blew this game. Like, I don't know, like, what decision did he make?
I'll say this:
blew the game. I think if anything, like, should be mad at the coordinators, because I didn't think it was coordinated correctly. I have one more decision that Sean McDermott made that was questionable that we can get to, but yeah, get your last.
Let me just say this: the Bills were up 10; it would have put them up by 13. If they were up by 11, and it would have made it a 14-point game, I may have kicked the field goal, right? Because then really the worst situation is probably that it's going to be tied. But to only go up by 13, to me, like, that's still, I don't know. I think if they were up by 11 to go up by 14, that would have been a little different. And then obviously, I think it's a different situation too. If like you're up by 13 maybe, and you go and it puts you up by 16, even though it's still only a 2 possession game, that's a little different. So I think the 13 points is kind of really what would kind of lean me towards going for it in that situation.
Yeah. And then the last decision I have here wasn't sort of a go for it type of decision. It was a personnel decision. Cam Lewis starting at strong safety. We mentioned those 2 big plays where I thought Cam Lewis had a solid game outside of 2 plays, and they were 2 big ones, taking a bad angle on the Dalvin Cook huge touchdown run and not knocking the ball down, mano-a-mano against Justin Jefferson on that 4th and long. Both of those plays probably could have ended the game. If Dalvin Cook doesn't have that big run, they got to burn a ton of clock. Who knows if that offense gets its mojo back? Same thing. Game's over if he knocks the ball down. You traded for Dean Marlowe 2 weeks ago. The defense hasn't changed since Dean Marlowe left here. And, Dean Marlowe's now had 2 weeks to get acclimated. Dean Marlowe over Cam Lewis. Maybe the Buffalo Bills win this football game. That was the 3rd decision from Sean McDermott. And who knows, maybe that was a Leslie Frazier decision, but head coach has got to okay it. That was the 3rd thing that sort of miffed me a little bit. Was I love Cam Lewis, and like I said, I thought he had a solid game, but he took some of those, I'm not a strong safety, or I haven't been a strong safety for very long. I'm going to learn my lessons on the field, and he learned them big time. And it cost the Buffalo Bills the football game. Maybe a veteran like Dean Marlowe doesn't make those mistakes.
Maybe he doesn't, but we'll never know. And obviously the knee-jerk reaction is to say, like, let's get Marlowe in there. Like, why wasn't he in there? Traded for him. Roy says, are we overrating Marlowe? Probably. Like, he's a serviceable safety. He's not necessarily a starting caliber guy, but again, when you're down your top 4, like, you're down your entire starting secondary, then like maybe that is a situation where a veteran makes a more veteran type play and knocks the ball down. I'm not saying like Cam Lewis is a veteran. He's not a rookie, obviously, but like, I see people saying, like, why didn't Leslie Frazier tell Cam? Like, I promise you that, like, that was the individual player making a mistake. I cannot see in any scenario where, like, coaching or someone didn't say, It's fourth down, knock the ball down. If it was literally the player making a mistake, and Cam Lewis came out and admitted as such that he has to knock that down. So to me, I put that more on the player than the coaching in that situation, because that's just awareness that you have to have. And I'm sure that someone on the coaching staff had said, knock this ball down.
And AK Cash too makes a great point. He says, to be fair, Lewis saved the touchdown. Like I said, outside of 2 plays, I thought Cam Lewis played extremely well. I was really proud of the way he stepped in, and we're gonna have this conversation about Damar Hamlin a little bit. Like, Damar Hamlin looks like he could be a piece beyond this season. Like, he is balling out. Cam Lewis looked like a guy who could put his hat in the ring too, outside of 2 plays. Like, he looked good. And that's what the Buffalo Bills look for. Guys like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, you need to be interchangeable. You need to be able to drop back into center field just as well as play at the line of scrimmage. Now, Cam Lewis is a little bit smaller, but he played pretty serviceable outside of those 2 plays. Whereas Jaquan Johnson, really, outside of being able to mix it up at the line of scrimmage, which he didn't even do well last game, not much of a center fielder. So Jaquan Johnson, I think, has played his way out of Buffalo after this season, where a guy like Damar Hamlin has played his way into a possible future role. I think Cam Lewis put his hat in the ring outside of 2 plays. It stinks that he took those lumps in such a big game, in such big moments that cost us. But I think it might be good for him in the long run. I think he could have a say in the future of the Bills secondary as well. So
I agree.
It stinks.
I agree. And look, I'm wrong all the time about stuff. We love the draft. I was big in Damar Hamlin in the draft process.
You were a big Damar guy. Every mock draft.
I have receipts. We can go back and look at them. I get them right every once in a while. He was one I got right. And I had made the comment in the draft process as well about him, and it's looking like it could prove true, is that he is just solid all around. Like, you can put him at free safety if you need him. You can put him down in the box if you need to. He's not supremely athletically gifted from the safety position like we've seen like other guys like maybe in the past, or even some of the rookies coming up, but he is heady and he's solid, right? And so he is a piece, I think, in the future of this defense. And I think this gives the Bills an option when it comes to the future here. And I think, in my opinion, although he can play probably a little bit of split safety, I do think Damar Hamlin is better suited down sort of in the box in that more Jordan Poyer type role. And maybe Micah Hyde does come back next year. He is under contract. Maybe he's able to return and you have yourself a little Micah Hyde and Damar Hamlin combo at safety. And maybe that opens the door to bring Tremaine Edmunds back. Like, I'm just kind of, and the wheels are spinning. The wheels are spinning.
Yeah. And Roy Collins comes in and says, Lewis will be a nice depth piece. No more than that, in my opinion. I agree. I don't think Cam Lewis is a future starter. When I said, putting his hat in the ring for 2023, I sort of meant it as like a third or fourth safety. I didn't really mean as a starter. But a comment here from Mike Hartle. He says, I'm sick of McDermott, Dorsey, and Frazier mismanaging this uber talented team. Again, we just walked through the 3 things that I thought Sean McDermott did wrong. I don't know if any of them are really mismanaging too much. I don't know how much blame I want to put on Sean McDermott for this one. I really just don't see too many situations where he mismanaged. I saw situations where players didn't execute, and I saw situations where we can maybe question the coordinators. But I struggle to really sit here and be mad at Sean McDermott over this loss. So let's get to these other 2 guys and see if maybe some of that anger is justified. Let's start with Ken Dorsey. I got 4 notes on Ken Dorsey here, plus a really good tweet from one of our guys here at Cover One, Sharpen Pencil. Number 1, short yardage. The Buffalo Bills have to fix it. The red zone and that just past midfield where we had the 2nd and 1, we punted, where we had 2nd and 1, and then through, and then through the pick to Peterson. Just unacceptable. Some of these short yardage situations the Bills find themselves in and cannot pick up. Going away from the running game in the second half, losing that flow that we had, absolutely unacceptable. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but you could talk about it again. The dump offs are there, so I'm not mad at him over like play calling and stuff. Like Josh Allen throwing that pick into the end zone to Gabe Davis. I'm not mad at Ken Dorsey over that. Like, dude, you had Devin Singletary underneath. Josh Allen's the one who made that decision. And then this offense to me just seems to lack an identity. Like, what's their go-to? Josh Allen making a play? Like, that's their go-to. Josh Allen rolls out of the pocket and a guy, off script makes a play. Josh Allen off script makes a play. Buffalo's go-to is Josh Allen making a play off script. Like that, they don't have an identity outside of that right now. And that's my biggest issue with Ken Dorsey. Those are the 4 things that really grind my gears when it comes to Ken Dorsey right now.
Yeah. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, too, it's like some of the best plays in this game were when Josh Allen was off script, right? And a lot of those runs late in the game were off script runs. I mean, another game where Josh Allen leads the team in rushing, right? I mean, like, and a lot of those come from off script plays. And for me, there's just a general lack of creativity. I mean, Josh Allen has 6 carries for 84 yards and leads the team. And how much of that 84 yards was off script? Probably almost every single one of those yards was off script. I think the activity, the route concepts, I think, Eric did a good job of talking about this a bit in the Cover One group chat earlier today. Just like, there's not a lot of like great concepts there. The spacing seems off. And it just seems like they're relying a little too much on Josh Allen to just make something happen because he's Josh Allen than actually being creative with the play calling. And I think a lot of this, we can kind of try to look back a bit and say, we had some of these same criticisms very early on with Brian Daboll and eventually kind of worked through it. And we saw that creativity kind of shine through. And that's ultimately, obviously, Josh Allen, a big part of it, what got him a head coaching gig. I think Ken Dorsey is going through the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of being a first-time play caller. He's had his highs, he's had his lows. I mean, it's summed up very picturesquely, I would say, in those two memes, right? Or the 2 GIFs or whatever, the videos, whatever, where he's like picking up his papers and leaving like he just left the day at the office, and then he's got the notebook slam, right? So it's like, I think Ken Dorsey's a really emotional guy. I think he's a very competitive guy, but I do think at times it's possible that the fact that he's a first-time play caller, he's maybe saying to himself, let me try to put this on Josh Allen because he's my best chance to win, rather than being confident in himself and doing what he needs to do to be a bit more creative with the offensive personnel he has. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of these games where it's been like Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and not a ton of the secondary pieces involved. So that's my general criticism at this point, is like the lack of creativity and getting like the other pieces involved as well, and some of the concepts. And I think that's my biggest gripe so far.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned it too, sort of briefly, but all of these things that we're talking about with Ken Dorsey, we talked about with Brian Daboll at points too. Like we forget the fact that like last year we lost to the Jaguars, and then we came back against the Jets and we scored a lot of points, but we looked clunky. And then we got crushed by the Colts. And then, we beat the Saints on Thanksgiving, but the offense, even though it scored a ton of points, looked clunky. Then we couldn't beat the Patriots in that wind game. And then we struggled in the first half before picking it up in the second half against Tampa Bay.
Right.
And all of the things that we're talking about right now, we were talking about back then and pointing the finger at Brian Daboll. That's why I was so pissed off at Colin Cowherd today saying, well, the Buffalo Bills lost Brian Daboll, and that's why Josh Allen sucks in the second half now. It just lacked so much context, and it just lacked so much. Brian Daboll had the same issues. He corrected them just like Ken Dorsey has a chance to correct them. There's just not enough sample size.
And let's not forget, Brian Daboll had been an offensive coordinator in the NFL before. He had been an offensive coordinator at Bama. Like, dude had tons of experience and still went through some of those same growing pains. Now, he was not a very successful offensive coordinator in the NFL in his prior stints, but it just goes to show you, like, first year play caller, we said, I mentioned this multiple times before the season, how much pressure there was going to be on Ken Dorsey going into this year, and that Josh Allen was going to mask a lot of that. But I think Ken Dorsey is playing that card too much in hopes that Josh Allen is going to mask maybe some of the lack of creativity, while not that he won't get it, but that he's trying to work through it and try to figure things out.
Something's got to change in the red zone. 100%. It's pathetic. The red zone is pathetic. Eric Turner was pointing out on Twitter today, some of the spacing in the red zone is really bad. I think there was a great comment from one of our video coordinators on Twitter today. He's a great follow, by the way. If you haven't followed him on Twitter, it's Adam, one of our video guys here. He charts data for us. It's on Twitter. He's Sharpened Pencil, but it's spelled SHARPNDPENSEL. And his tweet today was, I was hoping that Dorsey would be more like McDaniel and Reed and less like guys like Zach Taylor. You mentioned we got to be more creative. We got to move around more. And what he was referring to in that tweet, and he goes on to say, the Bills have 118 plays with motion this season, ranking them 9th in the NFL. The Brian Dable used motion and movement pre-snap so well. And Allen's EPA with motion this year is 210. His EPA without it is 0.077. There is a stark contrast between how our offense moves the ball when we utilize motion than when we don't. It makes it easier on Josh Allen. He can see if they're in man or if they're in zone. You can move between multiple personnel packages. I would love to see more Reggie Gilliam on the field. It seems like he's gone away since the Tennessee game. So those are I'm more than welcome to be critical of Ken Dorsey, and I'm willing to point out all of these warts, but I'm not going to say fire the guy or Sean McDermott deserves to be fired because he hired Ken Dorsey. All of you were all calling for Ken Dorsey last year. Everyone was like, Brian Dable sucks after the Jacksonville game. Make Ken Dorsey the offensive coordinator. Everyone was doing it. Everyone was. So those same people are now saying fire Ken Dorsey. What's next? Hire Joe Brady? Go out and get Sean Payton? Come on. It's one thing to point out the warts like we're doing here and to point out the things that need to be corrected. But I don't want to see people calling for people to be fired because I just don't think that that's necessary. And no one in the comment section is calling for anyone to be fired. I'm just getting fired up over the stupid shit I see on social media.
Our comment section is probably the best.
You're smart people.
Of everyone in this comment section
you make me sane. Thank you.
It has a very well thought out opinion. The second you go beyond sort of this sort of sane, rational, it
wouldn't be.
You go on Twitter or other places or Facebook, it is bad out there. And people, this is my problem generally with social media, is that people look at things in such a binary fashion that if you're critical of something, it means somehow it translates into you want the guy fired. That's not what this is, right? We are trying to be objectively critical about what we see as things that need improving. At the end of the day, we want the Bills to win more than anybody, right? We want the Bills to win the Super Bowl, and it's a journey to get there, and we're just kind of pointing out the things along the ride, right? Bills Reddit Twitter is insane, but the
I love you, Ryan. I love
you guys. You guys are great, and it's just I think everyone here realizes what we're doing. If you've watched our show long enough, we want the Bills to win more than anything. But it's okay to be objectively critical about certain things.
And our show was never around during the Rex Ryan days. But if it was, I would have been yelling fire Rex Ryan because kind of ironic that I'm saying it this week when we had 12 guys on the field. But literally they couldn't put the right number of players on the field. It was a shit show under Rex Ryan. He took one of the league's best defenses and turned them into hot garbage. So if I feel like somebody needs to get fired, I'll say they need to get fired. If this offense is still having the same struggles and it costs us a playoff berth and we're still last in the red zone by week 17, maybe you consider moving on from Ken Dorsey because maybe calling plays isn't his thing. Maybe that's a consideration you make at the end of the season, but it's certainly not something that you make now and again. People in the comment section are not. I'm just overstepping here because people on social media got under my skin today. Let's move on to Leslie Frazier here. To me, it's a lack of execution. I'm not willing to people were calling Leslie Frazier a genius 3 weeks ago for the way he, coordinated a defense that shut down Patrick Mahomes on that last drive and for what he did in LA. I mean, you can't be mad. First round pick Greg Rousseau out. First round pick Tremaine Edmunds leaves at halftime. All pro Jordan Poyer out. All pro Micah Hyde out. First round pick Trey White out. First round pick Kyrie Elam out. Down 6 dudes. Last week he was out with, Matt Milano was out, who's playing like an all pro. It's just an unbelievable rash of injuries. And on top of all that, they were still cooking. They were fine until Tremaine Edmunds went out. And then the second half, it sort of fell apart. Now, a lot of that is, again, the front four didn't get pressure. Whenever the front four got pressure, our defense was fine. When they didn't, it fell apart. Who wouldn't with a secondary that looked like that? We needed our front four to be perfect, and they weren't perfect. They were just fine. And to me, that's not on Leslie Frazier.
Again, Leslie Frazier, one of the least of my concerns in this game. Defensive side of the ball, it gets magnified because of the big plays that the Vikings made in some of the most critical moments. But again, I believe wholeheartedly that those are execution errors. I don't think Leslie Frazier is necessarily putting guys in bad positions. Could they have done more against Jefferson? I don't know. Like, there are two guys on Jefferson every time it seemed like Kirk Cousins was throwing the ball, he had two guys near him. So it's like, you could say, like, should they have double teamed Jefferson more? Okay, Hawkinson was doing damage. Thielen was making some it is not a great position for Leslie Frazier to be in. Thought he handled it pretty well, and the defense did give the ball back to the offense plenty of times in this game, and the defense did make the stand at the end of the game when they needed to keep the Vikings out of the end zone. So at the end of the day, like, the 4th and 18 sucked. One play, lack of execution. The big run by Dalvin Cook, bad tackling, bad angle from Christian Benford and Cam Lewis on that. Like, Leslie Frazier, to me, doesn't deserve a ton of blame in this when he's starting an entire second unit in the secondary against a very, very talented Vikings receiving corps. So I'm not putting a lot of blame on Leslie Frazier. I think he's the perfect guy to have coaching this defense. And again, I don't know who you're going to get better out there right now to coach this defense. Leslie Frazier has been fantastic. So, yeah, I can't put much blame on him.
Yeah, I see some people were talking about McDermott never having a guy with play caller experience. I think he padded Ken Dorsey pretty well with Joe Brady, who's called plays at LSU and Carolina, Mike Shula, who's called plays. Aaron Cromer has been offensive coordinator. He's never called plays. Rob Boris, the tight ends coach, called plays. You know, he sucked at it. He still did it for 1 year. So a ton of play callers in offense, and Brian Dable had like 4 or 5 years of play calling experience when he was named the offensive coordinator as well. Previous to that, there was literally a dinosaur at offensive coordinator and Rico Dennison, who had been, I think, calling offenses since the 1960s, and this playbook looked like it, but he quickly moved on from that after 2017. But on to another topic here. I mean, we're almost an hour in here. We haven't really gotten to Josh Allen yet. So we've sprinkled him in, and he's been a part of almost every single conversation that we've had. And someone said, where's Aaron Cromer in the running game? We're going to get to that after Josh Allen here. I think his first half, he was taking his checkdowns. He was spreading the ball around. Second half was a different story. It was a bunch of hero ball type of interceptions, whether it was in the red zone. It's sort of like they played like they were behind in the second half, throwing the ball all over the field as opposed to trying to keep the running game going. How much of that was on Josh Allen? How much was on Ken Dorsey? I don't know, but you know, the numbers have been abysmal in the second half the last 3 weeks. There's no denying that. But I think Josh Allen showed in the first half what he's capable of. I think he was doing it on an arm that was probably 60% or so. So to me, it's just about finding a balance. I don't know. Where do you stand with Josh Allen right now?
You know, I remember a game last year where, you know, the Bills lost to the Patriots in that win game. It was not a great game. And then Josh Allen came back a couple weeks later and was just like the epitome of taking what the defense was giving him, right? We talked about like those up and down moments between the Colts, Jags, etc. But then you go back to that Bills game on the road in New England the day after Christmas, and you look at that game and you say, wow, like Josh Allen took everything the defense gave him. Stephon Diggs had that, you know, quiet the crowd, you know, giving the to the crowd in that game. The not safe for work, the language there. And it was like from that point on, it was like Josh Allen just was like, I'm going to take what the defense gives me, and I'm going to take my checkdowns. I'm going to take the short passing game, and I'm going to take the shots when I need to. And I feel like, look, he needs to be brought back. He's human. Like, coaching staff needs to get to him and be like, look, man, we got to like take sometimes with the defense. Like, it reminds me a bit of that. And I think that he will, right? I think he's realizing, and he will realize that he's cost his team maybe 2 games now in the last 2 weeks. And he knows that the aspirations of this team are to win the Super Bowl and go on a deep playoff run. So I do believe he will correct, but I also think that a lot of this comes down also to maybe there was a difference between having a guy like Brian Daboll in his ear saying stuff like that to him versus a guy like Ken Dorsey, who is a lot, by all accounts, like a
more
bit
aggressive.
more aggressive guy.
Yeah, more psychotic.
And more psychotic. And I think this is a role where this might be a situation where in the past with Brian Daboll, Sean McDermott did not have to step in and maybe have a few
He might
words.
have
But
to,
this might be a situation where in the past he hasn't had to with Brian Daboll. This year he might need to. Like, Josh has got to get back to that situational awareness of taking what the defense is giving him. And he was super efficient doing that right after, like during that Patriots game and then in the playoffs. I mean, it was incredible. So I think if he can get back to that, and we know he has it in him, then this team can really take off.
I really feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers game, where like the average depth of target was like something insane, like 14 yards, was the Bills getting a little too high on their own supply. Like they were literally playing Madden out there against the Pittsburgh Steelers offensively. And ever since then, I feel like
13.68 yards per attempt.
I mean, that's just insane.
7.67 yesterday, by the way.
Yeah. So it got better. I just feel like they really got high on their own supply against Pittsburgh, and it just really, they started just relying too much on it, and they're just like, oh, big play. We can hit the big play whenever we want. We don't have to worry about the underneath stuff. We can just pick up chunks and chunks whenever we want. We don't have to worry about this underneath stuff. I mean, the Patriots won football games for years and years and years with the death by 1,000 paper cuts sort of mentality. But at the same time, I don't want that either. You got to find a balance. I was watching the Chargers game last night, and one of my least favorite coaches in the National Football League is Joe Lombardi. The guy's an absolute wimp. Like, he's got Justin Herbert, and he treats him like who's the backup quarterback there? He treats him like he's Chase Daniel. Like, Justin Herbert never takes any shots down the field. Like, that offense is pathetic. Like, it's just dink and dunk West Coast. Like, the dude thinks he's Bill Walsh and it's 1980. It's awful. You don't want Josh Allen to be that guy. Josh Allen is Josh Allen. But you got to find that balance between death by 1,000 paper cuts when that's what the defense gives you and taking your shots downfield. And I thought late last season, Brian Daboll found that balance. And everyone remembers Brian Daboll finding that balance and utilizing the pin and pull to create a running game, and Josh Allen taking his check down because there was a slot receiver he trusted in Cole Beasley. Like, it was just a perfect storm late last season, and the Buffalo Bills came hot out of the gate this year, and they just haven't been able to pivot. And some of those things like Cole Beasley and, Emmanuel Sanders and Brian Daboll, who they've had to fall back on, they don't have to fall back on. So it's going to take them a while to sort of find that new normal and to find that balance again. I'm confident that they'll find it. I just think it'll take some time, and it's been really ugly. And it's been figuring out, that they can't just chuck the ball down the field every play.
No, they can't. And look, when Gabe Davis is on, like, he has helped certainly with the efficiency. And we've talked about the efficiency with him. Like, his efficiency is very sporadic, not great. And so when he has good games, Josh Allen tends to have good games. I mean, Josh Allen yesterday was 67% completion percentage. I think it was his third highest completion percentage game of the year based just on that statistic. So it wasn't like he did come down, right? From he was over 8 yards per attempt in the game after Pittsburgh. I believe he was under 7 against the Jets, but like yesterday, 7.67 was a good clip for him, and he was 67% completing the ball. Obviously, the issues were the costly turnovers, fumble aside, the 2 picks. But Walter says, I think Allen not having a reliable slot is huge. And I would agree. Like, there needs to be that element in this offense. And I thought that maybe, Dawson Knox could
he was better last game.
and not necessarily, he's not the slot receiver, obviously, but to take some of that pressure off of Josh over the middle of the field in the short area. Like,
All
you're
that money they
paying him
paid
to
him.
do that. Expecting McKenzie to replace, like, yeah, McKenzie was never going to be Cole Beasley. I mean, that's just not who he is. McKenzie's best plays have been on, a couple different like shot plays, maybe here and there, deep crossers, and the jet sweep type plays. Like, that's just what he is. So, and I just don't know that, like, we just haven't seen enough of Khalil Shakir to know what he is yet. The coaching staff hasn't put him in those situations. Maybe if the situations he is in, Josh isn't getting the ball. Is he open? I don't know. But like, that's just not there in this offense right now. And it makes you wonder, like, is there a spot for Jamison Crowder coming back from his injury, if he's able to come back to make a mark on this team late in the season?
Yeah, and I mean, Jason M coming with a great comment. He said Crowder was always going to be our best slot guy, and it's the most underrated injury we have had this year. Me and Kevin Misseri were having this conversation on the pregame. If Jamison Crowder doesn't get hurt, he's probably getting the majority of the slot touches at this point. I think he would have surpassed Isaiah McKenzie. And not to toot our own horn, but I think we were 3 weeks ago, before it really was an issue, we were talking about like OBJ, and we needed him because we need our reliable slot guy, whether it's OBJ in the slot or moving Gabriel Davis inside or the ability to move Stephon Diggs inside. We were one of the first people to start like ringing the alarm, like this slot receiver position is an issue for the Buffalo Bills. And it's really come to fruition the last couple of weeks, the Buffalo Bills lack of slot receiver. And yeah, I'm still miffed as to why Khalil Shakir is not getting more volume. I mean, there just must be something that we're not seeing, whether it's in practice or his snaps in game when he's not targeted, etc. There's just a reason why we're just not privy to it, and maybe the reason why the coaches are idiots. Who knows? So let's move on now to the running game. Devin Singletary, 13 for 47, 3.6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns and a fumble. I'm not mad at his fumble. I didn't like, he's got fumble issues, but like, I wasn't mad at that fumble. Like, that's just a really good play by the Vikings defender. I kind of thought Singletary was down by contact, to be honest, and it just wasn't reversible because the way the referees called it.
Yep.
James Cook had a solid 5 for 25, 4.4 yards per carry. Again, in my opinion, not fed the ball enough. Isaiah McKenzie went 1 for 18. We finally get to see a little bit more of that. That jet sweep, that motion that we talked about wanting to see more of. Duke Johnson, for some reason, had 2 carries and he produced 4 yards out of it, and no touches for Nyheim Hines, at least as a running back. He was out there as a receiver. It was clear the Bills were trying to get him the ball, down the field when he was out there, but they just didn't connect. And the running back that we traded for 2 weeks ago, yet to get the ball in his hands on offense. So that's something we could talk about as well. So what are your general thoughts on the running game?
I mean, the fact of the matter is you did trade for Nyheim Hines. Like, you didn't necessarily give up a ton of capital for him, but why isn't he being integrated into the offense? I saw some good comments from, I hate to say it, but Kev, our favorite Dolphins fan, talking about how the Dolphins traded for Jeff Wilson, immediately integrated him in the offense. Niners
Christian
obviously
McCaffrey.
Immediately integrated Christian McCaffrey into the offense. And I know
Tony.
McCaffrey's a different beast, but still, you traded for Nyheim Hines, and we were worried maybe that was going to be to the detriment of James Cook, and it really hasn't been. And James Cook has looked pretty solid, but like, you haven't been incorporating Nyheim Hines. Sean McDermott gave his sort of typical coach speak answer today when asked about Nyheim Hines. He's still getting up to speed. I'm sure when he gets up to speed, he'll have his chances to make impact. The same answer like that you and I could have scripted for him before we even heard the question. So is he a great runner? Maybe not necessarily the best runner, but that's not really why you brought him in, right? You brought him in to be a dynamic receiving type back, use him as a receiver, and like, you have some of that in James Cook as well. But to be honest, James Cook hasn't really gotten a ton of run receiving the ball lately, and he's looked pretty good as a runner. So it's like, who knows what the Bills are doing with this running game? They don't have like, their identity is to like go to it early and let Devin Singletary get run early, and then kind of like it just kind of fades away. Like, I don't know what their real identity is running the ball, because they don't like really commit to it. And I'm not saying they're going to be a huge running team, but like, it's really hard to kind of figure out what they're trying to do with this running back group right now. Like, it's obvious Singletary gets first crack, and they want to get James Cook touches, but like, what did you do? Why did you bring Nyheim Hines in? Like, is he really not ready to like make any kind of contribution? Like, can you at least like manufacture him some touches, give him a chance? Like, I don't know what's happening there, but it is kind of annoying to see like other teams trade for running backs and have them make immediate impacts and then not see the Bills use Hines.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Like, we were having this conversation today. The reason why I'm so miffed is because like I don't even know what I want to see. Like, part of me wants to see James Cook get the bulk of the carries because I think James Cook could potentially explode if he's given a higher volume. I like what I've seen out of James Cook. I've been very impressed, but not a lot of volume. Aaron Quinn made a great comment today. He's like, I think that Devin Singletary should touch the ball 18 to 20 times a game. And who knows, if Devin Singletary touches the ball 18 to 20 times a game, maybe there's more flow and more balance to this offense. Maybe it's taken away from James Cook and given more to Devin Singletary. Part of me wants to see Nyheim Hines and James Cook like implemented a little bit better. There's more to life than the RPO. It seems like the Bills are running so much out of the RPO. They've taken Reggie Gilliam out of this offense. They've taken sort of that pre-snap movement where they're like lined up 5 wide, but then Reggie Gilliam comes in as a fullback, or Reggie Gilliam's in as a fullback, but then they split out in 5 wide. Like, they've taken a lot of that out of the offense. I don't understand why. I love them to steal some things from Andy Reid's playbook and just get the ball into the hands of Cook, get the ball into the hands of Hines, get them in space with the ball. Isaiah McKenzie, like, utilize these dudes, get them the ball behind the line of scrimmage, give them the space, let them create the screen game. Like, where are all of those different things
A guy
that we talked about wanting to implement in this offense? So whether it's giving Devin Singletary more carries and being traditional, or whether it's getting these other guys, the ball in non-traditional ways, we got to do something. You got to do something.
And I like the comparison to Andy Reid's offense right now. Like, they have guys they have 3 guys going for them right now. They have Clyde the Glide, they've got Isaiah Pacheco, and they've got Jerick McKinnon. They used Jerick McKinnon a bunch yesterday as a receiver out of the backfield.
Two touches, I think, or 2 targets for Edwards-Helaire that last game too. So even he's starting to see his way worked out of that offense.
I mean, and they really are liking McKinnon right now too. And like, we liked McKinnon. We've liked McKinnon for a long time. Like, it's doable, right? It's doable. I think even if we had Saquon trouble, we'd still be in this predicament. It's clear that Brian Daboll has adjusted to his personnel with the Giants. He is not treating Daniel Jones like Josh Allen. He is treating his offense based on the personnel he has, and that is running Saquon Barkley as much as humanly possible. I believe Saquon had over 30 carries yesterday against the Houston Texans. So that's not something we've ever seen out of a Bills running back in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the offensive line, I didn't have any issues with the pass blocking. I thought the pass blocking was fine. It's usually typically adequate. Josh Allen does cover up a lot of the warts in the pass blocking game. There was nothing like outrageous that I saw. Run blocking, again, it's just the short yardage stuff. And a lot of it, I just feel like we've gone away from like running out of 12, and we've gone away from like putting Reggie Gilliam in the game. And I talk all the time about how jealous I was of that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense when it was clicking. It's a hot mess this year. But when it was clicking, they could bring out Leonard Fournette. They could bring out 12 personnel. They could jam it down your throat, and then they could spread you out 4 wide, and they could pass it. Like, they were very versatile, and they could line up in a bunch of different formations. The Buffalo Bills are lining up in a bunch of different formations, but they haven't been running out of it traditionally lately. Like, that game was like all RPO stuff, at least from what I remember. I haven't had a chance to rewatch. It's going to be a tough one to rewatch. But so many times it was Josh Allen making the decision. He always seems to make the wrong decision and getting into the ball, the running back, and he's just stuffed in the backfield. Like, there's just nowhere for the running back to go. So it's going to be interesting. Like, I blame the offensive line for not getting a push, but at the same time, like, I feel like the play calling could be better too, and put the offensive line in a better situation to block for the running back. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Expect some snow next week. Sean McDermott was already hinting at having to be able to run the ball better as the winter approaches. What do they say in Game of Thrones? Winter's coming. Yes. Sean McDermott definitely sort of teased that. And I think you might see maybe some of the stuff you saw late last season to get Devin Singletary going. You might see that.
I'll believe it when I see it
this week against Cleveland if it snows.
I'll believe it when I see it. I'm taking that approach right now when he makes comments like that, because I'm starting to like not disbelieve what Sean McDermott's saying. That's not what I mean, but I also feel like he is a very deliberate with how he answers questions as to not really say anything while trying to say something. And so, look, I'll believe it when I see it, Sean.
Yeah. Great comment from Walter Scales here. He says, is Davis developed or is he just getting more playing time? He hasn't exactly taken a step like we've hoped. Yeah, it seems like, he might just be like an auxiliary weapon, like a really nice auxiliary weapon, but an auxiliary weapon. I didn't hate his game. I liked Dawson Knox getting more involved. I liked Isaiah McKenzie's game outside of running out of bounds on that Josh Allen interception to Patrick Peterson, freeing up Patrick Peterson to then jump the route to Dawson Knox for the interception on that 4th and 1. I didn't think it was going anywhere anyway, but still, they picked up a ton of extra yards because Patrick Peterson was freed up by that boneheaded play by McKenzie. But he did a nice job for the most part. Dawson Knox did a nice job. Gabriel Davis, obviously Stephon Diggs, absolute dog. I thought the receivers were fine this game, and I think they did their jobs this game for the most part. Any final thoughts on the offense before we close out with the defense here?
Not really. I mean, Davis, like we've mentioned in the past, like he's just very, like he's a very, I'll call him inefficient receiver. Like he's got 24 receptions on the year. He's like, he's averaging a ridiculous yards per reception this year, 22.7, which is just like, that's not going to be sustainable, right? Like,
yeah.
And so again, when he has those good games, the Bills tend to do better. When he doesn't, like, I'm wondering if he really is just going to be kind of like, I'm not go as extreme as saying like our version of Deshaun Jackson because like of years past, because Deshaun Jackson had some pretty good seasons there with the Eagles. But he's kind of giving me a little bit of those vibes with those high yards per reception, a little bit of that boomer bust vibe to him. I think it just shows that the Bills are really lacking that true slot. And that's kind of where I'll leave it for the receivers.
Special teams, awesome. Tyler Bass, Sam Martin doing their jobs, the return units. I really like, we were talking in the Cover One group chat. Naheem Hines looks like Andre Roberts back there, where he's just aggressive with his punt returning, which is nice to see. Just someone confident back there who can pick up some yards. So I really like the special teams unit. So good job, Matthew Smiley, giving you a thumbs up. That ends our segment on special teams today. Defense, player of the game to me on defense was DeMar Hamlin. Like, this guy's a dude. He's a dude. He's a dog. He's an absolute dog out there. I really think he has something. He could be a long-term answer for this team at safety. Speak on DeMar Hamlin. Anyone else who stood out to you on defense again? We'll talk more about defense in totality in a second.
Yeah, I mean, DeMar Hamlin stood out. Obviously, Tremaine, before he got hurt, was a standout to me. And I did think that Ed Oliver and Von Miller stood out a bit. Like, they had their moments, but overall, like, would have loved to seen them get home a bit more with that pressure. But I know Rousseau's out on the other side, and you haven't been getting a ton from. I mean, Basham did have a nice sack, but ultimately, I think Hamlin was probably, the best player overall. And I think Edmunds, to me, Edmunds was on track to be the player of the game before he got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, when the front four stepped up, Christian Benford looked good. When the front four stepped up, Dane Jackson looked good. When the front four didn't step up, both of them got beaten a little bit, Benford and Dane Jackson. So to me, it's really tough when the secondary is so beat up. We sort of made that, we sort of had that conversation earlier tied into Leslie Frazier. Like, the defensive line was fine. Like, Shaq Lawson, I thought, had a good game. Jordan Phillips had a good game. Ed Oliver had a good game. Von Miller had a good game. Matt Milano had a good game. Epinesa and Basham, even though you used 2 second-round picks on rotational guys, like, they were good in their rotational role in this game. Like, the defensive line was good. They just weren't perfect on every play, which is what you needed. The way the secondary is so beat up, and it's just like, they were against the Rams, but they weren't, this week. You can't expect perfection on, I think, every single play in the National Football League. It's just not realistic. And they couldn't live up to that standard today, that perfection standard. So the defensive line played great. I just mentioned all those names: Lawson, Phillips, Oliver, Epinesa, Basham. They all stood out to me. Milano played great again. When the defensive line got home, Dane Jackson made a play. Christian Benford made a play. Cam Lewis, despite getting burned twice, made plays. DeMar Hamlin made plays. I'm not too mad at the defense, despite giving up 30 points, oddly enough.
I'm not, because they kept giving the offense the ball back. Like freak plays, like the 4th and 18, where Justin Jefferson is just like unreal. I mean, like, just it's super unfortunate that like Cam Lewis didn't knock the ball down and like somehow actually helped him catch the ball. Like, it's just freak play. Like, but they did give the offense plenty of chances. They did get the ball back for the offense,
The
multiple
offense,
times.
you know what?
Cousins, 2 receptions too. Let's not forget, right? Like,
Yeah.
they did take it away twice. So
I still can't believe Kirk Cousins completed that like across his body, like absolute piss missile to Justin Jefferson.
Yep.
I was like,
Eric put that post.
Josh Allen
Eric put that post out, and I was like, "Wow, I've never seen Kirk Cousins make a throw like that. Like, unreal,
absolute out of body experience." Oh my god, is my hair gray? Absolute out of body experience for Kirk Cousins on that play. The Buffalo Bills, I think, have given me some gray hair. I can't tell if it's the lighting or I'm graying, but I'm a little concerned now. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Solid hour 20 here. I feel a lot better. The Buffalo Bills will be we're staying home to face Jacoby Brissett and the Cleveland Browns at home in the snow. Any early thoughts, Dave, pop into your head thinking about Bills Browns on Sunday in that 1 p.m. window?
Well, I'll say this. Jacoby Brissett, Bills have faced him before. Got that win in New England, a couple years back on the road when it was Brissett starting in place of Tom Brady. Look, the Browns have been struggling, right? There's a good chance they're going to be missing again one of their top weapons this week in David Njoku's got the high ankle sprain. If he's out, that's one weapon down for them. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are a nice duo. They do have Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, but it's still Jacoby Brissett, and he's a bit of a statue back there. If you can get pressure on him, he's not the most mobile quarterback. And the Browns defense outside of Myles Garrett really hasn't been that great either this year. Like, yes, I understand the weather situation. If that kind of works into the Browns' favor, I get it. But like, this isn't a team that should be putting up 30 points on you like the Vikings just did.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is a team that like shouldn't put up more than like 14 to 17 points on this defense with the way they're set up. So like, this has gotta be, in my mind, a get right spot for the Bills overall. And like, not really so much for the defense, I would say, but more for the offense. Like, this has got to be a get right spot for this Bills offense.
Yeah, Pops Mafia comes in and says, how did the Dolphins destroy the Browns? I saw no highlights. I haven't seen a single highlight from that game either. I know Jeff Wilson cleaned up for me in fantasy, so that was nice. But Tyreek only had like 50 yards and a tutty, so he could have done better for my fantasy team. But oddly enough, like, is this a measuring stick game for the Buffalo Bills? Like, the Dolphins just curb stomp the Browns 39-17. If the Bills go and squeak one out against the Browns, would that be cause for concern? Or maybe it's just a different week, any given Sunday, weather conditions are different, et cetera, like chalk it up. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. The Buffalo Bills, as good as they are, have measuring stick games. Like, have the Dolphins gotten that? I mean, they're first place in the division. I shouldn't be talking them down like I am, maybe, but measuring stick game?
I mean,
we haven't talked about that since 2019.
At this point, I just want a good, clean offensive performance, and I'll just take the win. I really will. Like, yeah. I think they just need a win to get back on track. I do think that they will rebound. I do think they'll have a good performance this week, but I'm not going to sit here and say they need to score 39 points to match what the Dolphins did for it to be considered a success or anything like that.
Jason M comes in with a great comment. He says, it's only a measuring stick game in the sense that if we lose, it'll make me sit back and be like, okay, what the F is going on? These problems are real and we are in trouble. Apparently the Dolphins ran over the Browns on Sunday. So
they did. It was a Jeff Wilson. It was a Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert show.
Yeah. So, and the Bills get everyone's best shot. They were everyone's Super Bowl prediction. Even though they're 6-3 and they're in third place in the division, they still get everyone's best shot. They're still the talk of the town. Minnesota Buffalo was still the first thing everyone was talking about yesterday. You've already got, Fox Sports putting up Josh Allen infographics, 0-4 in his career in the playoffs. Like, we're still Colin Cowherd still talking his shit. Nick Wright's still talking his shit. Like, we're still the team that everyone talks about. As good as Miami's playing, the Bills still get more pub. So, Other teams see that, and we get their best week in and week out. We're the measuring stick game for a lot of teams, so it should be interesting. I don't mean to sound like I have too much hubris there. It's a fact. So, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. As always, if you could please, it really helps us out if you like the show before you head out. It really helps us with the algorithm. If you have a chance, come back here, leave a comment in the comment section. It really helps us with the algorithm, not the live chat, but the comment after we're done broadcasting. If you're watching us on demand, leave a comment. We'll make sure to get back over the course of the week and respond to your comment. We always appreciate people who watch on demand as well. And just the number one thing you can do to help us is just to share. If you enjoyed this nice hour and a half therapy session, hit that share button, that little copy button, copy it, send a text to your friend, send an email to your friend, family member, anyone you think might enjoy what we do here every Monday night on the Air Raid Hour. And of course, you can listen on demand, any audio platforms, simply by searching Air Raid Buffalo. And another way you can support the network as a whole, Cover One Pass, $57 a year, gets you members only access, exclusive content, and you're really going to want to be in those Slack channels. If Twitter's a little too much for you, get into that Slack channel. We have some great conversations in there. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. As Astro says, very therapeutic. Gary Coughlin coming in saying, great show, boys. Favorite show, period. Thank you, man. We appreciate that. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?